Hi, welcome back. Now I've made a lot of videos about base kits needing nerfs or buffs recently, but today's video is about something different. A couple videos ago I've mentioned that if both units are at E0 as 1, Eclea is slightly worse than Acheron, especially if the teams have the same cost. However, despite the team cost, at E2 S1, Eclea is substantially better than Acheron for multiple reasons. This is also the fact for the other new DPS units like Herda when comparing her limited eidolons to any other older DPS unit. This is also the case for My Daisy 1 and E2, which are kind of insane, but I won't really be discussing them here, you can go look them up yourself. Now, in the end, this isn't a very huge problem, but I think it's pretty worth to discuss. So in this video, we're going to be talking about newer limited eidolons becoming too broken, and discuss any potential consequences of that. However, when talking about limited eidolons, since they're so OP these days, you may want to consider spending some expendable income on them. And if you're thinking about doing that, why don't you check out lootbar.gg. If you've never heard of Lootbar, it's a platform that facilitates recharge transactions for hundreds of games, most notably Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact. Lootbar is cooperating with the Hoyoverse routing partner, allowing users to enjoy all official recharge events safely and securely. Lootbar supports international payments, offering up to a 23% cost advantage compared to in-game purchases by leveraging favorable exchange rates, which also avoids the Apple tax for iPhone and iPad users. Also, if you click my link in the description or the pinned comment, you will get a further 8% discount for your purchase. All you have to do is log into your Lootbar account, select the game you want and the pack that you want to purchase, enter your UID right here and the server region right here, and then click purchase after entering your payment details. And then the currency will be deposited to your account within a half an hour. They've also partnered with many big content creators you've definitely seen before, and they also have thousands of 5-star reviews. Customer service will also be right at your fingertips if you have any questions or concerns. Again, head to the link in the description and pinned comments where you can enjoy all of Lootbar's services as well as an extra 8% discount coupon. Now let's get back to it. Now, limited eidolon value varies heavily from character to character, but we can definitely see a pretty exponential increase in eidolon value as the game goes on. Zila's E1 is pretty pathetic compared to newer ones. While 15% crit rate sounds great, not only is it not all the time, but you can also easily get enough crit rate from relics and characters like RMC and Sunday, so it quickly becomes useless or decreases heavily in value. Her E2 isn't as low value, but it's just speed, even if it is very consequential for a unit like Zila. Instead, because of E2, she actually becomes less synergistic with action advance units like Bronya, especially because their buffs start running out before you can re-trigger them if your action advancer doesn't have enough speed, and in the case of Zila, they almost always don't have enough speed. Now, you're not going to lose damage whatsoever if you do get Zila's E2, but the damage you'll gain won't be too significant, and it surely isn't worth the price of 2 limited 5 stars. Jiggyman also suffers from some pretty garbage limited eidolons, and his E6 is probably one of the worst I've seen in the game. 36% vulnerability is not E6 level, even if it is a very powerful debuff, however, it's not really the worst E6 in the game at all. And while a character like Jingliu has an incredibly powerful E1, making her a lot more powerful in single target situations, it's still only ever useful in single target situations. Her E2 is also a great damage boost, but you don't always have the energy to proc it enough times. Her E4 is pretty mid, as E4s usually are in the game, and her E6 is honestly pretty bad. Sure, an extra stack on her transmigration state is very powerful and gives her way more uptime and more opportunities to gain her burst for even more uptime, but the stat buff being simply 50% crit damage is pretty disappointing. If it was more like ice resistance penetration, it would have been a lot better. Now let's reiterate, with all of these characters, I'm not saying that if you get their E6 they won't beat the game. Every single E6 in the game will beat the game, even Blade and Argenti, who are actually definitely the contenders for the worst eidolons in the game. However, the value you get from limited eidolons from a unit like Jingliu versus the value you get from a limited eidolon for Firefly, Facia, or Acheron, and then the value you get from Firefly or Acheron compared to that which you could get from Eclea and Herda is miles in difference. Like I said earlier, Acheron is definitely better, even if it is ever so slightly than Eclea at E0 S1, but at E2 S1, Eclea becomes insanely powerful, and Herda even more so. I'm pretty sure at E2 S1 you have nearly 100% uptime for Herda's enhanced skill if you play it right. Meanwhile, Eclea's E1 completely takes care of all of her energy needs, and her E2 has more defense ignore in total than Argenti's whole E6. Again though, it does depend on the character. If Honkai didn't have so many damage issues because of all that HP inflation and power creep that's been going on, for a completely mechanical perspective, his E2 is one of the best in the game, and his E6 gives 60% imaginary resistance penetration. It's just that right now, there's not much value in it until Dill is buffed up. There are of course a lot of reasons for all of this to happen. Way back when the game first started, more speed on Zila with her E2 was game changing, Jingliu getting an extra stack for her state was super busted, and Blade getting 15% crit rate with his E2 was worth it, maybe. Honestly, if you're using up like 360 Star Rail passes just to get 15% crit rate, that has to be one of the worst trade deals in the history of trade deals maybe ever. But as I said, Blade along with Argenti are definitely contenders for the worst eidolons in the game. They're definitely outliers. 30% defense ignore for an E6 is pathetic. Now, we all know that characters could be getting some pretty significant buffs soon, and if they do, maybe the difference in eidolons won't matter too much. Maybe 80% damage for Jingliu every once in a while will be absolutely cracked, and maybe Zila getting that much speed is fine because you can now run her with Robin instead and get a lot more damage out of her than you would have with Bronya. However, they still wouldn't measure up to newer eidolons. And while the base characters themselves at E0S1 could be fine, those who pulled for their eidolons might still feel cheated, because someone with an E2 Herta is going to destroy an E2 Zila even after she is buffed, and will still destroy an E2 Acheron any day of the week. So what I do hope they do is they also touch the eidolons as well. I really don't think they will, especially because all the rumors and leaks we got did not mention any eidolons whatsoever, but I think it would be a great buff and maybe even incentivize people to spend for them, so it would get them more profits, but it also wouldn't feel like they're forcing players to get them like they're doing with newer units. I'm not asking for any massive changes for these eidolons either. The kits of older units themselves definitely require some changes, but eidolons only really need multiplier and percentage touch-ups, like maybe Argenti could use 60% defense ignore instead of just 30, with his goddamn E6. Now, while it's not a huge problem, I also think that it's definitely a problem, and a problem that could be so easily prevented. It's a problem because, again, people will feel like they're missing out on a very fun aspect of a character's kit if they don't get these eidolons, and thus will feel forced, or at the very least, heavily incentivized to get them. I believe Zila's E1 and E2 are pretty good examples of an E1 and E2. It gives her some buffs and makes her one of her abilities stack a little more. It's not like Aglaya's E1 where it completely fixes one of her issues that you have if you're missing a unit like Sunday, and it's not like Herta's E1, where it makes her so much easier to play that you can almost completely forget about any sort of interpretation stacking that you previously had. I got E1 Herta by complete luck, and sometimes I completely forget that I have to actually hit enemies to generate stacks, because I have full stacks almost all the time. While playstyle changing eidolons can be very fun and very worth it, like Jades E1 allowing her to become a lot more versatile, I think it's getting to a pretty insane degree where people will, again, start feeling forced to get them. And it's honestly starting to feel the same with limited Lycones like Acherons and Aglayas, even though no limited Lycone will ever be as important as Acherons probably. Again though, this isn't a super big issue. It definitely doesn't ruin the game and make it unplayable. All those issues are hopefully going to get fixed in the next couple of months. However, it also could have been completely preventable, because it's not like they had to do that. Someone who wanted to pull for E2 Aglaya was probably going to do it whether or not her E2 made her stronger than Acheron or not. But now that it is stronger than Acheron's E2, not only does it feel bad for E2 Acheron owners, but I've also seen so many comments saying they feel forced to pull for someone like Aglaya's E1, and that should never be the case. It just makes them more money, I guess. Again though, if you have an E2 Acheron, or hell, at this point even an E2 Jingliu whenever they buff her up as well, you're going to destroy the game probably. But an E2 Herta and E2 Aglaya will do it a lot better. However, I think there is something you can do about it. I think limited DPS unit eidolons are not worth it whatsoever unless you really like the units, because getting limited support eidolons is a lot smarter. You can use E1 Robin, E1 Rodmay everywhere, and E1 Sunday allows all remembers or summon units to destroy everything in their path. The final takeaway from this video should be to just get limited support eidolons instead of limited DPS eidolons. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. This is just something that I've observed and been told by a couple of commenters. By the way, thank you Satyam Gupta 5746 for the video idea. It was definitely very cool to look into. As I said, not a very detrimental issue, but an interesting one to note to make sure you know what characters you want to invest into. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express and Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.